What happened to the Mets offense? We'll talk about that and more on today's show.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Tuesday was a rough one for the New York Mets. They lose against the Blue Jays in pretty ugly fashion. Meanwhile, the Braves blow out the Nationals. The Padres and the Diamondbacks win as well, so you lose ground across the board in the wild card race. And we got to start to sound some of these alarm bells in this offense because there's a lot of ways that we can look at this Mets game. And I will talk about David Peterson and his bad start in a little bit here, but the lineup has to be better. And it's a really scary trend that we've seen. And I'll get into some of the numbers a little bit more in the next segment as far as what's happened over a larger sample size. But right now, this lineup just does not have that punch that we've seen in the past. I think a large part of it is we're seeing Francisco Lindor begin a little bit of a slump. Now, granted, he leads off this game with a base hit. He scores the first run of the game. But we haven't seen extra base hits in a couple of series now for Lindor. And you can tell the at-bats just aren't as strong as what they were throughout August, and particularly the end of August, the beginning of the winning streak. All of a sudden, Lindor looks like he's going through it a little bit. And this is a team that is so predicated on Francisco Lindor that if he's not playing at that MVP level, it seems to fall off in a pretty drastic way. This would be the time for a Pete Alonso to step up, for a Brandon Nimmo to step up. But those guys have been absent far too long throughout this season. And same thing goes for JD Martinez. So some of the established veterans haven't been getting it done. And there was a perfect opportunity in the first inning to really jump on Chris Bassitt, but the middle of the lineup really dropped the ball. You had Lindor and Jesse Winker lead off the game with a pair of singles. So you're cooking there early against Chris Bassitt. Mark Vientos comes up, has a pretty good at-bat, but he gets into a full count, and he keeps the bat on his shoulder, and he strikes out looking. That was a pitch that Vientos could have drove into the outfield. If nothing else, maybe you advance the runners, you get Lindor to third. Now, Lindor does score, but that lack of aggression from Mark Vientos in that spot, we've seen a couple times lately where he strikes out looking. Not that he should be blamed. He's one of the few guys that has been hitting lately, but that was just a missed opportunity. And then Pete Alonso hits into a would-be double play ball. The Blue Jays can't turn it, and that prolongs the inning long enough for Brandon Nimmo to get a blue pit that scores Lindor. Otherwise, the Mets don't get a run in the first and probably don't get anything on Chris Bassitt. But that was a real opportunity in that first inning for the Mets to set the tone and grab the early momentum, and they just didn't do that. And then from that point on, they never really strung together another rally. Bassitt was pretty dialed, 6 innings pitched, gave up 5 hits, 2 of them, or actually 3 of them in that first inning, 1 walk, struck out 8. They just didn't really have a chance against Bassitt after that first inning. And then their one rally in the 7th inning, again, they didn't take advantage of an opportunity to grab some momentum. You had Jose Iglesias who pinch hit for Eddie Alvarez, and that's another story that we could talk about the starting lineup today. Why was Alvarez in? Why was DJ Stewart in? I could give you the details, I guess. For me, looking at it, I understand Jose Iglesias not being in the starting lineup a little bit. Reason being, Eddie Alvarez did put up some good numbers in the minor leagues, and Jose Iglesias has pretty bad career numbers against Chris Bassitt. 1 for 15, 2 walks, 2 strikeouts. So on the surface, I get that a little bit. If Eddie Alvarez can give you something offensively, you're not going to see any drop-off really on the defensive side of things. We saw him make some pretty nice plays today. It does give you that component that you're missing without Jeff McNeil. DJ Stewart in the lineup, even though he got one of the 5 hits on Chris Bassitt, that just can't happen. Because you know what? Even if it's a marginal upgrade for a specific matchup, and I do understand that when you're starting DJ Stewart, you're basically saying, all right, DJ, you get the first 2 or 3 at-bats. Later in the game, someone's going to come in for defense. I'd rather have that defense for 9 innings. I'd rather have Harrison Bader in center field for all 9 innings with Nimmo and left when your team is just so much stronger out there. Having an outfield of Jesse Winker, Brandon Nimmo, and DJ Stewart, that's as bad as it gets defensively for this team. So I hated that part of it. It's not why the Mets lose this game, though. They lose because collectively as an offense, they just can't get anything going. And getting back to that seventh inning when Jose Iglesias does enter the game for Eddie Alvarez, he comes in to face a lefty, promptly gets a double. So you have a chance there, top of your lineup coming up, Iglesias standing on second base to really mount some type of a comeback, and it just doesn't happen. Iglesias scores on a couple of pass balls, but you have Lindor who flies out. You have Mark Vientos, who does hit the ball hard, but lines out to the outfield. And then Pete Alonso gets out as well. I can't remember if that was a strikeout. I think it was. But regardless, that was a missed opportunity to really build on something, to build on a leadoff double once you get Chris Bassett out of the game. The Mets just didn't do that. And this lineup has to find some answers here, because if they hit like this the rest of the season, they will not make the playoffs. And I'll talk about the offense a little bit more in the next segment. I want to now switch gears, talk about David Peterson, because this was his worst start in a very long time. Really struggled. Ultimately, I think this was two different things that really weighed into what happened with David Peterson. One on a serious note, the other one on an unserious note. We'll start with the sort of superstitious angle, and that's the fact that David Peterson and Tyler McGill, they just can't string together two good starts. I don't think that's ever going to happen. Tyler McGill took all of the good juju in that first game. He was lights out. He was dominant. And so David Peterson, just by Murphy's Law, was due to regress. On a more serious note, I think David Peterson got too much rest for this start. I really do. I talk a lot about how the Mets are setting up their pitchers for this stretch run. And I really believed, if you go back to some shows last week, that David Peterson would and should start on Monday. This would have kept him on 5 days rest because there was an off day last Thursday. And if you look back at what David Peterson has done lately, he has been pitching in a 5-man rotation, and he has gotten either 4 or 5 days rest for pretty much all of this season. The last time that he got rest that extended beyond that was the All-Star break. But from pretty much June on, really I think July on, since the beginning of June, they did have a 6-man rotation. So we'll say July on. This guy's been working every 5 or 6 days, and I think that routine has helped him. I thought today part of what he struggled with, which was fastball command, could be due to being a little bit rusty. Hadn't pitched in 6 days, 6 days rest. You're going a week after you pitched last. I think that was just too much time off for him, and I understand why the Mets are probably trying to protect him a little bit. They've been riding him really hard, but I think there's something to be said about getting a starting pitcher on that routine, and then a lapse of routine, something changes, it can cause a pitch like your fastball to elude you. And what I think we saw in this start more than anything was that lack of fastball command. When David Peterson struck out 11 on his birthday against the Boston Red Sox, he was throwing that four-seam fastball up in the zone, either right at the top of the zone for called strikes or just above it where he was getting that chase. Today, he was throwing fastballs over guys' heads. I mean, he was throwing fastballs nowhere near the zone. And what happens when you don't have that command of the four-seam up in the zone, well, now all of a sudden, if you're not locating up in the strike zone, these hitters can all of a sudden eliminate that area. They can eliminate anything up. So now they're just focusing for, middle down. And when you do that, even though his sinker might not have been horrible, now they're keyed in on it because they know if you throw a fastball, he's going to be missing the spots. So let's just sit on that pitch. You eliminate the top of the zone. Now anything below, these guys can tee off. And ultimately, that's what they did. He gives up 8 hits. It was just a rough game for him. And particularly, it was a really bad third inning. That was the killer for him because despite not having his best stuff, first inning, gets a big double play ball, able to get out of that jam. Second inning, gives up an unearned run. Mark Vientos makes an error at the beginning of the inning. He walks a batter, gives up a softly hit single, ends up scoring a run, but he strands too. So he gets out of that jam unscathed relatively, only giving up the 1 run. Third inning, that was the death nail for him. Starts off with a bunt base hit from Dalton Varsho, and Peterson should have just ate it, had no chance. Tries to glove flip it to Pete, gets away from him. Now you got a runner on second base with nobody out, and he ends up really kind of spiraling from there. He gets a ground out, but then gives up a double, a single, gets a pop out, gives up a triple that scores 2, hits a batter, gives up a single. You look up as the dust clears and 4 runs come across in that inning. Just really rough for Peterson. Goes back out, does put up a 1, 2, 3, 4th, gets the first out of the 5th before being pulled out of giving up a single. It was just a rough night overall, but really that 3rd inning was the killer for him. And again, not having that fastball command up in the zone was really just something that was too much for him to overcome, especially when for once his lineup didn't hit for him. Because the one thing that David Peterson has had in his back pocket for a lot of this year, he's typically pitching with a pretty big lead. I think that helps him at times. This was a game where he really had to buckle down himself and match the performance of Chris Bassett, and he just couldn't do that. The one bright side for the Mets, Huascar Brazaban got them 6 outs. He got them out of that 5th inning, final 2 outs there, put up a scoreless 6th. 7th inning got the first out before he gave up was it a double or a triple? Triple. And then Alex Young came on, gave up a double that scored that runner. That was, of course, credited to Brazaban. Young then got the final 2 outs of that 7th. Adam Ottavino pitched a scoreless 8th, and that was able to save Edwin Diaz, Phil Maton, Jose Budo, Reed Garrett, all of those guys. So you should have a fairly rested, ready to go bullpen with Chaminade on the mound. If we said at the beginning of this series the Mets would win one of the first 2 games, you might have taken that because you would have known that, Tyler McGill starting game 1. Doesn't work out that way. They get a great performance by McGill. Peterson drops the ball a little bit. The offense, though, is the problem really here. So that's what we're going to talk about next. What's happened with this lineup, and can they turn it on quickly with 17 games left this season? I'll break that all down in just a minute. First, though, quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Next week is the last homestand of the season for the New York Mets. Don't miss it. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. And Game Time has a new feature. It's called Game Time Picks. That makes getting tickets for your favorite live event even easier because Game Time Picks will filter out the fluff and only show you the incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste your time searching through thousands of tickets. When I get tickets to a Mets game, I'm not buying them until I'm pretty much walking into the ballpark because Game Time is the place to go for last-minute tickets where you can find great deals and you can check out in a minute. I mean, it is so easy to find seats that you like. 2 taps, you're all set. You can pay for the game, get in, have the tickets delivered to your phone very quickly. Really is the app to use if you want to go to the Mets game or any other live event near you. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. For those of you listening on the podcast feed today, I want to explain something that might have surprised you. You saw today the first postcast on our podcast feed. This is a new offering that you can get here with Locked On, where we will have post-game shows that are going up after every Mets game. Now, this doesn't affect the show you've been listening to for some of you for years, or if you joined this season, I'm still doing the same thing. You'll see my shows hit your podcast feed, by the morning. They'll go on YouTube at 6 a.m. every single day. So that nothing changes there. But there's now a Locked On New York Sports YouTube channel where they will have post-game shows for Mets, Jets, Yankees, Knicks, Giants, all the New York sports teams. So that's where you're going to want to go right after a game. And I'll actually be hosting the post-game show after Mets Blue Jays, the final game of the series, on that YouTube channel. And of course, hitting your podcast feed. So for the audio listener, you're going to get me twice tomorrow. So the post-game show, and then I'll do one a little bit different. Still your typical Locked On Mets episode. But because I'm doing 2 shows, I'll maybe try to touch on some things a little bit differently, and then I'll be back to my normal schedule of things. The host is Chris Schubert. Listened to his stream tonight, did a great job. So make sure you subscribe on YouTube to Locked On New York Sports. And if you're listening on the podcast feed, you want a little extra Mets coverage, you'll have it right there labeled postcast. Let's talk about the offense here because it has been a struggle lately. I think the best way to really showcase it is to look at the Mets offensive stats as a team month by month since this hot streak started. So back in June, The New York Mets led Major League Baseball in OPS. That is on base plus slugging. The best real just overall easy stat to digest that tells you how good a team or a player is. If you're getting on base and you're slugging, you're doing something right. The Mets led baseball with an 860 OPS. The WRC plus was 142, also the best mark in baseball. WRC plus is weighted runs created plus. Measures hitters on a league average of 100, 142 WRC plus, well above average. So they were top of the league in June. July, they were still top 10. They were 8th in OPS, 7th in WRC plus. August, they slipped to middle of the pack, 14th in OPS, 13th in WRC plus. In September, and it's early, it's a small sample size, but the Mets won a lot of games in this sample size. They're 19th in WRC plus, 20th in OPS. So it's been a steady decline down. On the bright side, in September, the Braves are 30th, but then again, that was before today, these stats that I pulled, and they've scored 12 runs on 15 hits. So I imagine they shot right back up, and they're probably, have a game like that in a month with only 10 games probably up to this point. Yeah, you're probably going to find yourself somewhere in the top third. So it's going to be interesting because the Braves have really been a team that's been let down by their offense. We'll see if this was a one-game aberration or if they can turn things on, because if the Braves all of a sudden start hitting, they're going to grab a playoff spot. And the Mets just can't back their way in. There's a chance that there'll be a collapse from the Diamondbacks or the Padres, but the Mets got to hold their end of the bargain, and they got to figure out a way to get this lineup going. And I hate to put it all on Francisco Lindor, but like I said in the first segment, Lindor is the engine of this team, and he has not gotten going in the way that he did even a week ago. And to criticize the guy on such a small sample, I'm not trying to do that, but it's more indicative of everybody else around him that when Lindor has just 5-6 games where he's not hitting home runs or doubles, manufacturing runs himself, the offense can fall by the wayside. He hasn't homered in 6 games, hasn't had an extra base hit in 5. Shouldn't be the end of the world, but Pete Alonso has been brutal in September. 14 strikeouts and 30 at-bats. And ugly strikeouts. That's the thing with Pete this year. The amount of times where he strikes out on the slider away. And then when he's cognizant of that and he has the bat on his shoulder, that's when guys come back door and get him or end up just throwing a pitch down the middle that Pete looks at. It's just he's guessing wrong always. And Pete Alonso is the type of hitter, you got 2.5 weeks left here. He can carry you to the playoffs. He's got it in him to hit 3 home runs tomorrow and carry you to a win. Going to Philadelphia in that bandbox, homer in each game. Pete Alonso has that capability, but we haven't seen it all year where he really just has that streak in him and the clock is ticking. So yes, I look at Pete Alonso and say, what's up there? But honestly, he's not even the one to blame the most. Brandon Nimmo has been silent for months. Pete Alonso has at least hit his home runs here and there. Brandon Nimmo, it's just been brutal since June. Had a bad July, a bad August, a bad start to September. I will acknowledge he's starting to hit the ball a little bit harder. Had those foul ball home runs in his last series where you saw him really turn on pitches, hit one over 100 miles per hour today that resulted in an out. But you need Nimmo to be your second best player. Really, that's what he's supposed to be. You need Pete Alonso to be your second best offensive player. You can look at that either which way. Those have been the two guys for the New York Mets since 2019 that have been the most consistent offensively, and they're putting up seasons that aren't horrible, but you can make an argument for both of them career worst years, and all they have to do here is put up a good last couple weeks, and all will be forgotten because Francisco Lindor has gotten the Mets almost to the top of the mountain. He has done it, I don't want to say himself, but he really has been the driving force. And these guys who are supposed to be right there with him, leading this offense, just haven't done it. Not to mention JD Martinez hasn't really hit since June. So you have your DH spot clogged here where maybe you could work Starling Marte into the lineup a little bit more. Maybe you could have Jesse Winker in there. We've seen him DH a little bit where he doesn't hurt you defensively, or you can work an extra glove into your lineup. But instead, it's JD Martinez because obviously he has that ignite ability as well. He hasn't done it. So I continue to talk about those 4 guys because they're the four veterans that are supposed to get the job done. Now, Mark Vientos, he has far exceeded all expectations, and he's the guy that's been doing it lately. Jesse Winker has come on and has been as good as you can expect a trade deadline acquisition. Those two guys, that's where they're batting second and third today. They've been really good. It can't be Francisco Lindor, Jesse Winker, and Mark Vientos alone. It can't be those three guys. You need to get contributions from Alonso, Nimmo, and JD Martinez. And obviously Francisco Alvarez, if he came alive, that would help this team in a big way. I'm just not going to count on that. I trust the veteran pedigree to figure it out at some point. Get hot at the right time. Maybe you go on a run this season, even beyond the playoff, or even beyond the regular season once you get into the playoffs. But again, the clock is ticking, and not having Jeff McNeil in the lineup, I think it does show up. I mean, obviously today, Eddie Alvarez gets that start, but just overall, Jeff McNeil in the second half was the Mets' best hitter, not named Francisco Lindor. He was putting together really good at bats, and he was hitting for extra bases. He was a doubles machine. He hit 7 home runs in the second half. He really did find something. Not having that steady at bat in the lineup, it just makes things a little bit thinner. The Mets got to figure something out here, and it just starts with those guys. Hopefully they step up in a big way. You do have Sean Manaea on the mound, and maybe that will really carry the Mets in this final game of the series. But looking at this road ahead, if the lineup does not put things together, the Mets will not make the playoffs. So hopefully they can turn it on and turn it on quickly. In the final segment today, I want to talk about the wild card race. What else happened today, and can Sean Manaea deliver? We'll go through that in just a minute. First, though, another word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports because unlike other apps on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. You watch the winnings roll in. So maybe on Sunday, you're looking at Malik Neighbors and you want more on his receiving yards. Maybe tomorrow or today, as you're listening to this, you're looking at Sean Manaea's strikeouts. You might want to go more there. You can combine players from different sports on the same entry. So there's so many different ways to play. You can get in on the daily action with your friends and become part of the Prize Picks community today, where you can win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. So you can turn $10 into $1,000. Cook up hot takes with your friends and win real money this football season when you and your crew run your game on Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB. You're going to get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. If you're an everyday listener to the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks from the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. You can also take part in our Locked On Mets signed photo giveaways, and you get the lineup graphics sent to your phone each day so you know who's in the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. All right, so let's talk about what happened today outside of the New York Mets in the NL wildcard race. As I've already mentioned, the Braves just destroyed the Nationals by a score of 12-0. 15 hits, Michael Harris multi-home run game, Sean Murphy multi-home run game. They just destroyed them. And crazy thing is they actually lost Ronaldo Lopez in the first inning, yet they did not give up a run. So Lopez exited with shoulder soreness. We'll see what happens there. But the Braves now have evened up their series against Washington, and Game 3 will be Max Fried versus Jake Irvin. So they have the momentum on their side. You have to expect they're going to win that game. And then they have an off day before a 4-game series that starts on Friday against the Dodgers that'll carry on until Monday. So this is a point of the schedule for the Mets where they might have an opportunity to gain some ground. And that's really critical as you think about that head-to-head matchup that is looming large. The Mets, they got a chance here if they win this series against the Blue Jays and then they win their series in Philadelphia. That would be a great week. That's a big check mark. There's 3 weeks left, right? Huge check mark for this week if they can win this series, win the next one, go 4-2 this week. You then come home, 3 against the Nationals, 4 against the Phillies. Big homestand. The Mets can win 5 of those games. So either you win both series or you sweep the Nationals, take 2 from the Phillies, they're going to be in a great spot when they head into Atlanta. And then you got to win that series. If the Mets do all of those things, they win with Sean Manaea on the mound on Wednesday, find a way to beat the Phillies this weekend in Philadelphia, have a great final homestand, go 5-2, and beat the Braves. They're in the playoffs, no doubt in my mind. But that is a lot that has to go the Mets' way, and they aren't going to get there without their lineup figuring things out. They can rely on their arms for some of these games. For example, maybe the bats just aren't going to wake up at the Rogers Center. Maybe it's not going to happen in Toronto, especially because Bowden Francis has been on a really good tear for the Blue Jays lately. That is a tough pitcher to face. The guy has a 0.50 whip, if I remember my series preview stats. I believe it's a 0.50 whip in his last 7 starts, which is 1 base runner every 2 innings. Not going to be easy. Then again, maybe a guy like that is due for a blow up. Regardless, Sean Manaea is on the hill. So it's really up to Manaea more than even the offense to deliver a Mets victory on Wednesday. If he puts up a great start, the Mets get some timely hitting. You can steal this series without your bats, is why I say steal it. And then you have a day off to regroup, and then you go into Philadelphia where, yes, they have some good pitching, but that is a hitter's ballpark. The Mets can come alive there and maybe ride that momentum into their homestand. It's exciting stuff, but it also makes you nervous because it feels like everybody in the baseball world is expecting the New York Mets to fall off. No one cares that this team has been, by their record, the best team in the National League potentially since June. Okay, it's either been them or the Diamondbacks, but no one cares about that. The Diamondbacks, they went to the World Series last year. People believe in them. People believe in the Houston Astros because it's the Houston Astros, and they completely washed away a bad start, and now they are potentially the favorite in the American League. The Mets aren't getting that benefit of the doubt. They're just not going to because it's the Mets. That's the franchise that we all follow here, okay? And you know what it's like to be a Mets fan. And even that, in some ways, it almost plays against the Mets because there's just that expectation that the worst is going to happen. The rug's going to get pulled out from under us, and the Mets aren't going to make the playoffs. And it sucks to have that feeling, but that's been reinforced if you're a Mets fan for year over year over year. I'm about to turn 29 this weekend. I've got 2 decades now of having this team disappoint me. And for my dad, he doubles that time. And I'm sure for some of you who were around before my dad, since the beginning of the New York Mets, it's been even longer. So in some ways, the franchise history weighs on you in times like this, and it shouldn't affect the clubhouse. It shouldn't affect the team, and I don't think it does. But as a fan base, you watch a game as ugly as Tuesday night's contest against the Blue Jays, while the Braves win, and you just have the doubts that are present in your mind. What I encourage all of you to do, have faith, believe in this team. They've earned that. And down the stretch here, I still think they're going to get the job done. But I can't lie. There is still the doubts in my mind because I'm a Mets fan. Just sort of comes with the territory. But Sean Manaea is going to play a key role in this team down the stretch. He's coming off a rocky start, but a rocky start was really just 2 bad pitches that led to a couple of home runs. If he can deliver and be the ace that we've come to know lately, get the Mets a victory here, get the homestand off on a good note next week against the Nationals. He'll pitch twice next week, and then he'll pitch in that Braves series, I believe. They keep him on regular rest from here on out. Sean Manaea is going to be a guy that really can be a difference maker for this team in the final 17 games. Final 17 games, you get 4 Manaea starts potentially? That's a good chance to win about a quarter of your games when he's on the hill. So hopefully he steps up and the Mets find their way to a series victory on Wednesday. Again, I'll be covering this on 2 different shows. So if you're watching on YouTube today, do us a favor, go over, find the Locked On New York Sports YouTube channel. You'll see the postcast from Tuesday night's game with Chris Schubert. Subscribe to that. I'm going to go live from there. If you're an insider, I will send you a text when I'm going live with the link. And you can also find it on my Twitter. So follow me at Finkelstein Ryan. I will be going live right after the game, Mets Blue Jays on Wednesday here. And then I will also, of course, have your typical show. Nothing changes for the Locked On Mets audience. You'll have my show on Thursday morning, and every day for the rest of this season. So make sure you still subscribe on the YouTube channel, the Locked On Mets YouTube channel. Goal is to get to 10,000 subscribers by the end of the season. Follow the show wherever you get your podcasts. Follow me at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listener, your first watch every day, not for your second watch. Head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything in the world of sports. Talking about Locked On Sports Today with our local hosts from each team, league-wide hosts from each league, by Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube.